Thanks, everyone. I'm glad that so many people are interested in this as well. I think it's a rather special topic for a tech conference. This is going to be an opinion piece, so bear with me. As he said, I'm not a lawyer. But still, I'd like to talk to you about Go's strategic advantage in the new era of cyber resilience and product liability in the EU. First, a little something about me. I work as a cloud native and DevOps engineer at Unit 214 in Munich. In my day-to-day, I work with Kubernetes, I work in the CNCF ecosystem, and about 2 years ago, I naturally came across Go and started loving it. I'm a passionate road cyclist and as passionate as one can be about regulation, right? But still, this is our game plan for the next roughly 25 minutes. Compared to the title of the talk, we're going to approach this topic backwards. So first, I'd like to give you a little intro or maybe a refresher into EU legislation. Second, then I'd like to talk about my personal main takeaways from those two new regulations. Third, I'm going to share my opinion about what this means for us in the software community and what is happening right now, which organizations are involved. And lastly, I'd like to talk about Go's strategic advantage, my opinion about Go's strategic advantage. And generally, I like to create awareness for this topic because I think those are some big rocks, some large challenges ahead of us. And yeah, I hope you're going to enjoy this journey with me. All right, so let's dive in. EU legislation. First, the key institutions that are involved. The first one is the EU Commission. They are responsible for proposing new legislation and then implementing it once adopted. The second one is the Parliament. Their responsibility is to amend and then approve or reject proposals from the Commission. And the third one is the Council of the EU with similar responsibilities than the Parliament, but it consists of different people. So Parliament members are directly elected, whereas Council members are representatives of states, right? Okay, so those are the parties involved. How does this process look step by step? I think it's quite straightforward. So we start with the proposal, then the back and forth between Parliament and Council starts. We have first reading, second reading. If they don't get along, we might start a conciliation committee, but then at the end, hopefully, if they found a compromise, we enter the implementation phase. If they are not able to find a compromise, those are the stages where the body in charge can ultimately reject the proposal, and then it's really dead and need to start fresh. All right, how does implementation look like? When we talk about implementation, we have basically two types of laws. We have regulations and we have directives. So the first one, regulations, they are immediately binding across the whole European Union once published. And directives, they are not immediately binding law. They create the obligation for member states to enact their own local laws implementing the directive. And if we look at the two laws at hand in the context of this talk, Cyber Resilience Act is a regulation, so it will be immediately binding. And as the name sets, the Product Liability Directive will have to be implemented by the member states. And to cut this short, from now on, I will start using CRA and PLD as abbreviations for both. All right, so that was already our refresher about EU legislation. So let's dive into the two proposals or two new laws and where they stand right now. So the negotiation process for European standards was actually pretty straightforward. So the first draft was released by the Commission in December last year, and then after the first reading in both bodies, it was just adopted. The first reading in the Council was not long ago, and now both laws are basically waiting for the publication in the official journal of the EU. And then once published, the timeline for implementation starts. So regarding the PLD, after publication, our member states have 2 years to enact their own laws implementing the PLD. And regarding the CRA, the timeline's a bit longer. We expect that in mid-2026, the vulnerability reporting obligations will become mandatory. And then compliance with the whole text will be mandatory in sometime in 2027. So the timeline here in total is after publication, we have a transition period of 36 months. All right. So now what do they actually say? The PLD is actually quite old. It was introduced in 1985, and its purpose was always to harmonize product liability laws across the EU. Very exciting, I think. But this new revision, for the first time, extended the definition of a product to include software as well. For me, it was so weird to find this out because that wasn't included before in product liability in the EU. So that basically means once in effect, if you introduce a software product in the EU market in a commercial manner and it's defective, you are liable and you can basically get sued. So, okay, so if you introduce something defective, you're screwed, but what does defective actually mean, right? Definitions are important here. So, first of all, if something's not working, right, if there are bugs and it's not working, it's obviously defective and you are liable. But also, if manufacturers fail to address security vulnerabilities, they will become liable as well. And moreover, like a general lack of software updates over the whole life cycle of your product, this is going to be considered defective in the future as well. So not just updates to fix bugs or not to fix security vulnerabilities, but also to fix bugs. And hopefully this will finally create like a business incentive for manufacturers in the EU to think about the whole life cycle of their products, right? And not just about getting it out the door, earning money quickly. So both legislations have a couple of definitions in common. We already touched on a couple of things. For example, what means commercial manner, right? What is the whole life cycle of the product? And what constitutes a manufacturer? So I will talk about those things in a couple of slides. But in general, the difference between the two is the PLD makes you liable for something, whereas the CRA does not create liability, it creates obligations for you as a manufacturer, which means if you don't comply, it's not the consumers that sue you, it's the EU that fines you, basically, or eventually can pull your products from the European market. All right, let's dive into the Cyber Resilience Act, right? This one is completely new legislation, and I think it's great that this one finally addresses not just the increasing presence of digital products all around us, but also the inadequate levels of cybersecurity inherent to too many products. In general, it aims to set standards and harmonize the EU market in terms of secure digital product development, again, considering the whole life cycle of a product. I'll get to that in a second. Further, it aims to encourage manufacturers to prioritize vulnerability management and patching because there will be substantial reporting obligations, public reporting obligations. And then lastly, with that, it also aims to empower consumers to make informed decisions when buying products, when comparing manufacturers in the future, because with those public reporting obligations, you can do your own research and find out which manufacturers do good or not so good in terms of cybersecurity. So you don't depend on leaks and blog posts and videos on YouTube anymore to find out who's good or bad. You can actually inform yourself by looking at those official databases. All right, so the next list is not a comprehensive list. These are only my personal favorites about the CRA, my favorite obligations they will introduce. So if you introduce a software product into the EU market in a commercial manner, they must be free of any known issues. Isn't that great? I think the important one here is free of known issues and free of any known issues, because I think we all know enough examples where manufacturers put something on the market when on the date of the introduction, it's already running on years-old software with hundreds of bugs, and updates were never really intended ever in the whole life cycle of this product. So this is not going to fly anymore in the EU. Second one, your products must contain sensible default configurations when it comes to security. So default admin passwords, root, not going to work anymore. The third one, we need to follow security by design principles, which means things like unhashed passwords in databases, not going to fly anymore. This is accompanied by, of course, the classics, confidentiality, also in transit. So unencrypted traffic in the internet doesn't fly anymore in the EU. Integrity, availability, those things will all become obligations for you as a manufacturer in this new era. And what does this actually mean? Now you must get security updates for the whole predictable life cycle. So this is a case-by-case thing, obviously, but this definitely will extend the usual 2 years warranty we have in the EU. So currently what people expect is that we will end up with an average of 5 years of like the predictable lifetime of a product. And for some products, of course, the lifetime will be even longer. I don't know, if you buy a wireless router or if you buy an appliance in your kitchen, your fridge, the lifetime of this fridge is not just 2 or 5 years. Sometimes it's 10 years, the predictable lifetime of this. And then if it's that long, the manufacturer will have to provide to you software updates to your awesome smart fridge for the next 10 years. So I think that was a lot. And I hope that I was able to make you aware of some new things which are on the horizon. But what is now, what's like really ahead of us? What does this mean for us as a software community? So I believe this legislation is going to be as groundbreaking as GDPR was. When GDPR was introduced in 2016 and came into force 2 years later, it, in my opinion, basically changed the whole software industry. And I believe CRA and PLD will have the same force. We all know this one. I think that's a classic. And while I do appreciate this poor guy in Nebraska and his contribution, we all knew that this model of a modern digital infrastructure is not sustainable. And I mean, we all know the examples in recent history, supply chain attacks, right? XZ, Log4Shell. I don't need to give you any more examples, I guess. But I think we also agree that the problem was never that guy. The issue was always that a lot of times we didn't really know how the full dependency tree of our applications looked like. Also, the issue was that sometimes we didn't even recognize if this guy in Nebraska moved on to another project and just didn't maintain his stuff anymore. Most of the time in our professional life, we didn't really get like the resources by our organizations to really follow through and to run software projects as we always wanted them to run, right? Well researched with security by design and in a sustainable manner. And I think with this new legislation, we have like another tool on our belt to make arguments to get more resources to do this actually. And if those things work out, this logo actually will not just mean that the product is safe to use in the EU, it will also mean that the product is secure to use. And that was an amazing marketing citation from the EU Commission. All right, so what is in scope? A lot of things are in scope. Hardware products are in scope. They have digital elements. Software products are in scope, obviously, right? But also all remote data processing solutions belonging to those products are in scope. Moreover, this regulation is not just broad, it's also very deep. So as a manufacturer, you're going to be responsible for the whole supply chain of your products, for security vulnerabilities in all of your dependencies. I give you a second to let that sink in. Out of scope are non-commercial products and things that are already covered by other legislations, like cars, what do we have? Medical devices, stuff like that. Okay, but now who is in scope? That's a bit more complex. So the first question you're going to ask yourself is the development happening in the course of a commercial activity, right? If not, you're not in scope. If yes, the next question is, are you directly monetizing this project? And directly monetizing does not just mean, are you selling this project? If you provide open source software and then you monetize managed services, consulting around those projects, this is also considered monetizing a project. So if you do this, you are considered a manufacturer. So what about free and open source projects? Here the question is, are you merely contributing, like in your free time, for example? Then you're not in scope, thankfully. If you're providing resources or infrastructure for those projects, for example, if you are hosting package registries or any other infrastructure supporting those projects, then we will go to the first question we asked ourselves. And then the monetization question, if we answer this with no, the next question is there like a legal body, a legal person involved supporting this project? And does this project is intended to be used in a commercial manner later? So this is the use case for foundations, like Rust Foundation, Linux Foundation. If the answer is no here, then you're not in scope. If the answer is yes, then you most likely are considered an open source steward. This is something which was introduced into the text after lots of feedback and lobbying by those open source organizations. And the difference between a steward and a manufacturer is basically that you still have lots of obligations, but the obligation structure, the reporting structure is much less, it's less strict than if you are a manufacturer, and your fines are also not that large if you don't comply. Okay, that was who is in scope. So what's happening in the community already? In my personal opinion, I think the most important initiative was started by the Eclipse Foundation in Brussels. Earlier this year, they started forming a working group, the Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group. And the purpose of this working group is to consult the Commission and the EU standardization organizations in their implementation of standards and guidelines. This is what's happening right now, and they are actively involved in this. So their goal is to add like not just best practices, but also pragmatic guidelines and standards into those guidelines into those standards. So if you're interested in what the current state of the CRA and its implementation is, I can highly recommend their work. It's really awesome. They have regular meetings. Everything is open sourced. Everything is available. So just Google that and you will find lots of information about this. All right, 3 out of 4, a couple of minutes left. Why do I actually believe Go has a strategic advantage here? There are a lot of things, and there are not just technical things and features. There are also approaches and principles and things I just generally love about the community. And I'd like to link them to the legislation and different parts. So the first one, of course, the compatibility promise. And now I will probably cite some people which are in the room with us today. When Go 1 was released, I think in 2012, this text was part of that release. And in a 2023 blog post, our friend Russ famously wrote, when we released Go 1 and the compatibility promise, we removed the excitement, right? Things should just work. And that's great, in my opinion. Moreover, he wrote, if we look at the first text, this raises the obvious question, when should we expect the Go 2 specification and to break old Go 1 programs? Who of you does remember the answer to this question? The answer was never, right? There will never be a Go 2 specification that will break those programs because there will never be a Go 2. I think we all remember the dumpster fire upgrading from Python 2 to Python 3. So I believe having this promise so deeply ingrained in the core philosophy of Go is an amazing asset. Okay, the next one is simplicity. Now I'm going to cite someone else, our friend Rob Pike, a talk from him 2015. He said simplicity is complicated. My interpretation of that was that he meant it can get really hard to create a programming language where simplicity and readability are at its core. Because like in classic software engineering, sometimes we tend to add features and flavors and sugar, and things get really complex. But Go's core focus is different, right? We want simplicity and we want readability because we strongly believe that readable and simple code is reliable code. And this will become even more important in the future in the EU if you are really liable for this stuff. So we believe that readable and simple code is easier to understand, easier to work with, and then easier to fix. And if you need to fix bugs for a product that's going to be out there for 10 years, generations of colleagues will work on your code. And that's why I believe like simplicity, in my opinion, is the best feature ever. And that's why I actually fell in love with this. All right, so now I'm going to be quick. The next one, the standard library. I think Rob said at GoForCon Australia last year that having a strong standard library right from the beginning was definitely one of the things the Go team got right. So everyone is pretty proud about this. And I also believe that eventually this enabled the development of this amazing trait of the Go community, that we are not prone to add new dependencies for every little thing we add to our programs. I think I heard it on a Go podcast this summer. This little phrase: a little copying is better than a little dependency. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I think it sums it up pretty good. The label zero dependency is proudly worn by high quality reusable Go modules nowadays in our community. And I think in the context of cyber resilience and supply chain security, this is also an amazing asset. All right, the next one is the ecosystem. Go is not just a programming language, right? The intention was not for it to be just a programming language. The whole purpose was always to provide a better way to build software. So we all know it's not just a language, it's a platform full of tools for all the tasks we need when we want to build software and provide software to our users. And then with the support of our community and Google as well, which is funding and hosting lots of those things, I believe like supply chain security will be a topic for which we are well prepared, so to say. All right, so we talked about supply chain already. That is the meme to go along with this. And when I look at what happened in the last couple of months, I definitely sense disturbance in the supply chain. So how is Go helping us? I quickly skim over this because I'm running out of time. So first of all our builds are logged, right? Meaning everything you need to have for reproducible builds is already inside our default tool chain in our go.mod file. You don't need anything else. Moreover, the content of different versions of dependencies is also logged per default. So no additional settings, tools, or third-party tools needed. Newer versions of dependencies will not be imported automatically. And then also regarding the version contents, I think this is taken from a blog post from the official Google Dev blog. There the author said that the checksum database, which is providing those checksum comparisons, this actually makes it impossible for compromised dependencies or even Google-operated infrastructure to target specific dependents with modified source code. Next one for supply chain. I don't know if you all knew, I didn't. Since Go 1.18, every binary created with the Go standard toolchain contains a standardized SBOM, also no additional tooling needed, also a great addition. And then when it comes to vulnerabilities, 2 years ago, the Go security team released Go Vuln Check, amazing tool. It's a command line tool that finds vulnerabilities not just in your project, but also in the source code of your dependencies. It's all backed by the official Go vulnerability database. And I believe with those two tools also at our disposal, we are really perfectly prepared for the challenges ahead. All right, let's bring it all together. The CRA and the PLD will bring massive changes to the software industry, in my opinion. They will finally force the industry to apply the principles that should have been applied for years. And we all here, as members of the engineering community, we wanted to do this for a long time. And I believe Go as a platform and our community is very well prepared for the challenges ahead. And if you take anything with you from this talk, I hope that now you feel more comfortable and confident to head straight into those hard discussions with your product managers, with the C-suite, with all the managers involved that you need to convince to get more resources and more time to focus more on supply chain security. So thank you very much. Big thanks to the organizers for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. You said you weren't taking questions, but you wanted people to reach out in the breaks, right? So do find Tom in the break, and I'm actually going to track you down because I want to chat about the implications for open source maintainers. Thank you.